So Andrew Klavan, who's a conservative political commentator, appeared on the Rubin Report last week, and during the interview, the topic of religion and atheism came up. Let's see what he has to say.
And so I became philosophically an atheist. I didn't really change emotionally because I already was not caring about the whole thing, you know. And I started to read atheist works. And one day I read the Marquis de Sade. And the Marquis de Sade makes an argument for atheism that is the only, as I would read these atheists, I would think that doesn't make sense. That doesn't really make sense. When you follow these atheists down the road, it really doesn't make sense. They sound like they're saying rational stuff, and then you go like, wait, that's not working. The Marquis de Sade worked all the way. He made perfect sense. If there is no God, there can be no morality. If there is no morality, do what nature tells you to do. What nature tells you to do is have pleasure at other people's expense. You know, what difference does it make? Why shouldn't you have pleasure at other people's expense? And that's what he took pleasure in. I thought that's the first atheist philosophy I've ever heard that makes sense from A to Z. That makes sense. And as a leap of faith, I thought, I can't go there. That's hell to me. To live taking pleasure off other people's suffering, I know that's wrong.
All right. So his main point is that the only atheist works that make sense are ones that say there is no God, there is no morality, have pleasure at other people's expense. Well, first of all, he's not actually talking about atheism. What he really means is that atheist morality, or secular morality, doesn't make sense. But before we talk about that, let's see the rest of what he says.
So why couldn't the underlying belief be that there's goodness in man, so to speak, that it comes from you, not necessarily from your creator, but there's something innate within us that would allow you to always stand up for freedom, would always allow you to stand up for liberty, free speech, all of those things that you would be concerned they could come get you for.
Right.
Couldn't you make the same arguments that you would make against that without the faith part?
Not really. I mean, you could say that that's true, and you'd be right. You know, you would say that it's true, and you'd be right. But it doesn't make full sense, because when you say that something is morally better than something else, it means that it is closer to an absolute moral good. If nothing is good, if there's no such thing as a good, then you can't be more good than something else, right? Think of it as a line, right? If there's no good and bad, then you can't be on that line. And ultimate moral good, just by logic, is going to have certain qualities. It's going to have to be conscious, because goodness is always a conscious choice.
So he backs up his point about atheist morality by making the claim that moral judgments have to be based on some absolute definition of good in order to be valid. He then claims that this definition of absolute good must come from a conscious being. Okay, you know what? I actually agree with this. In order to make valid moral judgments, an absolute definition of good must be made by a conscious being. And you know who that conscious being is? Us. Okay, those conscious beings are us. Humans are the ones who decide what absolute good is. So right off the bat, his argument completely falls apart. This has nothing to do with atheism, and has nothing to do with whether atheist morality makes sense. And the funny thing here is that he just made a perfect justification for Sharia law. This far-right, super conservative guy just made the perfect argument for Sharia law. As long as your morality is absolute and comes from a God, then it's all good. So that's the first huge problem with this argument. But let's look at another problem. He says at the end there, when talking about having pleasure at other people's expense, that he knows that's wrong and doesn't care if the whole world believes otherwise. He knows that's wrong. And that's when he took the leap of faith to become a Christian. Okay, so he literally just admitted that he knew it was wrong to have pleasure at other people's expense before he became a Christian. And look how he said it. He said that he just knew it had to be wrong. He didn't care if everyone else thought it wasn't, because he knew it was wrong. How? How did you know it was wrong? You weren't a Christian at the time, so how the hell were you so sure about this moral question? He just admitted that he had fundamental intuitions about morality before he was even a Christian. So while in the midst of the argument, arguing that atheist morality doesn't make sense, he proves that you don't need to believe in God to know what is moral. At this point, I think it's clear that he's not even aware of the arguments against his position. I'm convinced that he has never even read any of the arguments by Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris or Matt Dillahunty or any of the 1,000 other people that have made arguments for atheist morality before. And the argument is pretty simple. We know that humans have natural intuitions about human well-being, and we can build our morality and ethics based on an analysis of how actions impact well-being. There's no need for God in that. So Rubin eventually tries to push back on this a little, but not in any real substantive matter. Let's see how Andrew responds.
So okay, so let me try to. I'm going to push back a little bit, but
Yeah,
also try to
please.
extrapolate some of this stuff. So how, if it's all based in morality, and you can't, then aren't there many atheists out there that are extremely happy people in perfectly moral relationships
Oh.
that only put good out there and all of those?
Absolutely, it has nothing to do with that.
So then, what am I missing?
Their philosophies doesn't make any sense. See, most of us live with philosophies that don't make any sense. And one of the quirks of my personality, which is kind of what this book is about, is that I want what I say to be exact. You'll see people all the time who say, there's no morality. It's your opinion versus my opinion. Then they go home and they treat their children well and they don't cheat on their wives. And, if you question them, they might say some cynical thing, but that's not true. That's not the way. They're not speaking the truth of their lives. They're not speaking the truth of their lives. If they did, they would have to start thinking, well, where does this morality come from? How do I know it? Why do I know that it's right not to cheat on my wife? Why do I know that that's the right thing? That because I gave my word, I won't do it anymore? Why do I know that my word should reflect my actions? Then most people just don't think about it. They just don't think about it. So they can be perfectly decent, but they're living in a world that religion made to some degree.
But why does that matter, I suppose? If you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, if I was sitting here with someone who lived their life as authentically and positively and as true as you live yours, but without the philosophical jump that you took there, or the spiritual jump, I suppose, really the leap of faith that you took, ultimately you're not arguing that it would make a difference. It makes a difference for you, I suppose.
No,
right?
wait.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference to you and me. We can still have a beer and be friends, and you're a good guy, and I know I can trust you, and that's great. That's wonderful. So it doesn't make a difference there. It makes a difference in the broader sphere, because when people come and argue that you should have a safe space, when people come and argue that you should be able to tell that guy not to say what he wants to say, when people come and argue that they should take your freedom away, you don't know why they're wrong. You don't have a philosophy that goes down to the ground. They can always out-argue you. But what if he does this? But what if this happens? But what if if we don't force the guy to wear seatbelts, he'll die, and then his mother will be sad. And they can make all these surface arguments, and you don't know what you believe and why you believe it. You don't know why the founders said you are endowed by your creator with certain inalienable rights. Once you stop believing that, then Barack Obama is in charge of your rights. And if your philosophy doesn't work down to the ground, when these guys come along with their arguments, which are frequently very good sounding, you start to lose the things that matter.
So basically, Andrew just doubles down and says that this matters because atheists have no idea why they think things are right and wrong. He then says that atheists have no way of knowing why taking someone's freedom away is wrong. And just as a side note, I think it's hilarious that in a conversation about fundamental moral principles, he brings up safe spaces. Really, Andrew? Safe spaces? Is that the great moral problem of our time? But we'll let that go for now. The irony here is that he is the one who doesn't know why things are right and wrong. He's the one who doesn't have reasons behind his beliefs. If you asked him why taking someone's freedom away is wrong, he would say because of God. That's why. The only reason he knows that taking freedom away is wrong is because God told him. See, all his morality is a neat little trick to get out of explaining and justifying your beliefs. Because you've created and defined a being that by definition is perfectly moral, you can then use this being to justify any belief you have. How do I know that killing is wrong? Because God. How do I know that cheating is wrong? Because God. That's how. The funniest part of this is that he's claiming that he believes all of this because he questioned his beliefs and questioned how he actually knew that his beliefs made sense. Yet the reasoning he uses by definition evades whether or not the belief makes sense. By claiming that God is the foundation of morality, you don't actually have to think about what is moral. You don't have to actually think about hard ethical problems. All you have to do is go consult your magic book and see what that says. This is the exact opposite of questioning your beliefs. This is synthetically concretizing your beliefs based on nothing. There's no analysis at all. It's completely circular. All you've done is gone ahead and personally created a loophole for yourself that says that as long as you merely claim that your moral intuitions are from God, then your intuitions automatically become valid. How nice.